The Mobile Tensaw Delta has always been more than water and marshland. It's a cradle of southern grit, creativity, and culture. Born on the Delta, traces the unlikely rise of Morrison's Cafeteria, Lou's Fishing, Checkers Drive-In, and Wintzell's Oyster House. 4 brands shaped by the people, the water, and the stubborn spirit of the Gulf Coast. From cast iron kitchens to tackle boxes, from oyster bars to drive-in windows, these are the stories of how everyday ideas became southern institutions, each carrying a piece of the Delta with them as they grew. In the fall of 1920, Mobile, Alabama was a port city on the rise, and inside the German Relief Hall, a quiet revolution in Southern dining was about to begin. That's where J.A. Morrison opened the very first Morrison's Cafeteria, introducing locals to a new idea: self-serve, home-style food at a modest price. It was simple, efficient, and instantly Southern. At first, customers weren't sure what to make of it. Neither were the employees. But the concept caught on fast. By the late 1920s, Morrison's was thriving, serving hundreds of thousands of meals a year and even making a public stock offering as it grew beyond its humble South Alabama roots. To keep quality consistent across its expanding footprint, the company built its own supply chain. In 1946, Morrison's opened a food distribution office in Tampa, Florida, giving the brand control over everything from ingredients to the stainless steel equipment in its kitchens. It was one of the most vertically integrated restaurant operations in America. Then came the moment that changed everything. Morrison's won the contract to feed the cast and crew of the greatest show on earth in the early 1950s. That single job launched the company into institutional food service. Hospitals, schools, military bases, corporate dining. Before long, Morrison's was serving more meals in institutions than in its own cafeterias. By the end of the 1950s, Morrison's had become the nation's largest cafeteria chain, with more than 150 locations across the Southeast. For generations of Southerners, it became a ritual. The trays, the steam tables, the carved roast beef, the pies lined up like jewels. But taste changed. In 1982, Morrison's acquired the small but fast-growing Ruby Tuesday chain, and casual dining soon outpaced the old cafeteria model. By the mid-1990s, the company split into 3 divisions, and in 1998, the cafeteria arm, Morrison's Fresh Cooking, was sold to rival Piccadilly. The era of the great Southern cafeteria was fading. Today, only one Morrison's cafeteria remains, right here in Mobile, the city where it all began. A living relic of a century-old idea that shaped how the South ate, gathered, and remembered. Morrison's wasn't just a restaurant. It was a Southern institution built on efficiency, hospitality, and the belief that a good meal should always feel like home. Before Lou Children changed the face of American fishing forever, he was just a broke, Mobile musician trying to survive the Alabama Gulf Coast. He didn't start with an empire. He started with a bait shop, a cash register, and a shipment of bamboo poles that were about as straight as a politician's promise. But out of that crooked bamboo came the brim buster, the speed stick, and the low-profile reel that changed tournament bass fishing permanently. This is the wildest, most obsessive-compulsive story in the history of bass fishing. And it was all born on the Delta, the story of Lou's Fishing. I'm your host, Stu Donald. Let's head to the Delta.
He's the honorary mayor of Alabama and the fishing pole king of all kings, Dr. Lou Children. Thank you, George, my boy. The rough element of the breeze is now here, yes, sirree. And I have a nice little arrangement here on the Lou Children Barnyard Classic. Boys, I have you with me, huh? Well, this is a very difficult arrangement, and I hope you watch your notes carefully. Will you please do that? I'm ready to strum the Hawaiian guitar and vocalize.
Before Lou became the guy who redesigned half the fishing gear in America, he tried something even harder, making a living as a musician. He played the Grand Ole Opry, toured, and lived the kind of life where your paycheck depends entirely on whether strangers clap. It did not make him rich, but it did give him one important skill: the ability to read a room, which, it turns out, is also useful when the room is full of fishermen arguing about rod action. Lou eventually realized the music industry had one major flaw: it required the music industry. So he walked away, picked up a bamboo pole, and accidentally reinvented fishing forever. Most people go to Nashville to chase a dream. Lou went, took notes, and then improvised a different solo. I mean, Lou didn't start out trying to change fishing. He was just trying to keep his family alive on the Mobile Tensaw Delta, which, historically, is a place where the fish bite harder than the economy. He and his wife Bebe first sold shrimp as bait, then opened a tiny tackle shop in Foley. Nothing glamorous, just survival with a cash register. Then one day, Lou pulled a bamboo pole off the rack and declared it as about as straight as a politician's promise. Most people would shrug. It was a slower than usual Tuesday, so he had nothing better to do, and Lou decided to fix the entire fishing industry instead. So Lou starts experimenting with bamboo, not in a craft fair way, more in an obsessive compulsive kind of way. But American bamboo just wasn't cutting it. So Lou flies to Japan, finds better bamboo, better craftsmanship, and a brand new company called Fuji making rod components. Lou looks at Fuji. Fuji looks at Lou. And suddenly the U.S. fishing market has a new power couple. Let's call them Luigi. This is the part of the story where everyone else realizes old Lou isn't just building rods, he's building an empire. Before Lou became the guy who reinvented reels, he became the guy who accidentally turned a simple cane pole into a statewide personality. The Brimbuster wasn't high-tech, but it seemed futuristic. Didn't even pretend to be complicated. It was just a collapsible pole that didn't do anything extremely well except catch fish. Anglers loved it, and because it was light, compact, and didn't fight you like the old broom handle specials everyone grew up with, tackle shops loved it because they could barely keep the things on the shelf long enough to collect dust. The Brimbuster became so popular that people started treating it like a membership card. And that's the moment Lou realized something important. If he can make a simple fishing pole this good, he could probably make everything else better too. Which is how a collapsible stick became the gateway drug to one of the most influential fishing brands on the planet. Now, my father was one of the early converts to the Brimbuster. I once watched him land a 2.5-pound mullet on a 9-foot pole that had snuck into the brim bed we were fishing. To this day, a Brimbuster is always part of my personal arsenal. Lou moves from bamboo to fiberglass to graphite like he's speed running the evolution of fishing rods. Then he drops the speed stick, a rod so light and sensitive it made every other rod feel like a shovel handle with confidence issues. Anglers loved it, competitors hated it, and Fuji quietly said, "We told you this guy was dangerous." The Lou's speed stick emerged in the early 1970s as one of Lou's most influential innovations, combining new graphite rod technology with advanced Fuji components to create a lighter, faster, and more sensitive bass fishing rod than anything on the market at the time. Childry had already partnered with Fuji in Japan to introduce aluminum oxide guide rings and improved reel seats to American anglers. And those breakthroughs became core features of the Speed Stick series. The rods also helped popularize the pistol grip handle, a personal favorite of mine, giving bass fishermen better casting control during the tournament boom of the decade. By the mid-70s and early 80s, Speed Sticks were among the best-selling bass rods in the country, widely praised for their sensitivity and durability. In 1973, Lou releases the Speed Spool, the first low-profile bait casters. It was sleek, it was smooth, it was manufactured by Shimano before Shimano was Shimano. The reel was so good, it made pro anglers say things like, "Game changer." This is the moment Lou's company stops being a tackle shop and becomes a legacy. Sadly, in 1977, Lou dies in a plane crash. It's the kind of plot twist that would get rejected in a script meeting for being too cruel. But his family and partners keep the brand alive. They keep innovating, they keep pushing, and they keep proving that Lou didn't just build fishing gear, he built momentum. Today, Lou's is headquartered in Missouri, backed by major investors and manufactures globally. The rods are faster, the reels are smoother, and the brand still runs on Lou's original philosophy. If you make something better, people will notice. If you make something much better, they'll name a company after you. Lou Childry didn't set out to become a legend. He just wanted a straight bamboo pole. And somehow this bluegrass musician turned into an angling genius and made his company one of the most influential fishing brands on earth. Which proves one thing: sometimes greatness starts with a mistake and a man who refuses to let it go.
Excuse me, old chap, but would you mind terribly clicking like and subscribe? It would mean oh so much to me, seeing how as I gave my life for your entertainment.
If you've ever rolled up to a black and white checkerboard box with red trim and double drive-thrus, you already know the vibe. Checkers Drive-In Restaurant and his twin brand Rally's are two of the most successful non-dining room burger chains in America. But their story starts in Mobile with one simple idea: fast food should be fast. It's just another business that was born on the Delta. In 1986, Mobile real estate developer Jim Mattei noticed something the big chains were ignoring. At Wendy's, half the sales came from the drive-thru, while the dining room sat empty. Mattei asked the obvious question: why build a giant building if customers never go inside? So he flipped the model. He built a tiny modular restaurant, no dining room, but a double drive-thru, walk-up window, and a menu built for speed. That first Checkers in Mobile became the prototype of a new kind of fast food business. One that ran lean, moved fast, and pushed volume through 2 lanes instead of 1. The signature burger, the Big Buford, became an instant hit, and the chain's seasoned fries built a cult following. Checkers didn't just grow, it exploded across the Southeast. By the early 1990s, it was one of the fastest growing restaurant chains in America. The model was cheap to build, cheap to operate, and perfect for franchising. In 1991, Checkers went public. By 1993, it was opening stores so fast the big players, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and Hardee's, were forced into the value menu price wars just to keep up. When Jim Mattei built Checkers, he meant every word of the slogan: fast food should be fast. And he proved it by taking that same philosophy from the double drive-thru to the NASCAR garage. Mattei launched Mattei Motorsports with drivers Jeff Bodine and Michael Waltrip. For Mattei, racing wasn't a marketing stunt, it was the purest expression of the brand. If you're going to preach speed, you might as well chase it at 190 miles an hour. But rapid expansion comes with a cost. By the mid-90s, Checkers was overextended. Same-store sales softened and the company struggled to maintain momentum. Mattei sold off the racing team after only 3 years. While Checkers was taking over the Southeast, Rally's was doing the same thing in the Midwest. Founded in 1985 in Louisville, Kentucky, Rally's had almost the exact same concept. Double drive-thru, no dining room, fast burgers, low prices. Rally's grew by swallowing smaller chains, Maxi, Snaps, Zips, and by the mid-1990s, it was a major regional player. In 1996, Rally's was bought by CKE Restaurants, the parent company of Hardee's and Carl's Jr., but the fit wasn't great, and by 1999, CKE sold Rally's to Checkers. That merger created Checkers Drive-In Restaurants, Incorporated, a single company with 2 nearly identical brands. After 1999, the company made a strategic decision: keep both brands, but divide the map. Checkers stayed in the Southeast and Northeast. Rally's stayed in the Midwest and West. The buildings, menus, and operations became almost identical. The only real difference was the sign out front. This dual brand strategy let the company expand nationally without confusing customers who already had loyalty to one name or the other, not unlike Carl's Jr.'s and Hardee's. The early 2000s were rough. Both brands faced financial trouble, including bankruptcy scares, restructuring, and declining sales. But the company survived by going back to the basics, focused on burgers, fries, and speed, re-emphasized franchising, launched the You Gotta Eat campaign, tightened operations, and cut costs. In 2006, Checkers went private under Wellspring Capital. In 2014, it was sold to Centennial Capital Partners. The brand slowly rebuilt its momentum. Today, Checkers and Rally's operate around 740 locations, roughly 70% franchised, and the brand has leaned into bold flavors, loaded fries, and celebrity tie-ins like the Glorilla $4 meal deal. In 2023, the company restructured its debt and shifted ownership to senior leaders. In 2024, Chris Tebben became CEO, tasked with modernizing operations and stabilizing growth. But through all the ups and downs, the core idea never changed. A small building, a fast line, a big burger, and fries people swear by. And it was all born on the Delta, with a simple question about a half-empty dining room. One of the most common questions I get asked is, if a person can only eat at one restaurant while in Mobile, what restaurant best encapsulates the city? For me, the answer is the historic Wintzell's Oyster House. It has been a part of the culture for nearly a century, riding the same waves of economic whiplash as the community itself, crying with us, making us laugh, and feeding our hunger. Here's a brief history of Wintzell's Oyster House. Wintzell's Oyster House begins in 1938 in a Mobile that was still shaking off the Great Depression. Dolphin Street was a patchwork of pawn shops, barbers, and storefronts that closed before sundown. In the middle of all that, J. Oliver Wintzell rented a narrow sliver of a building for $8 a month. The first 4 months were free, and he opened a 6-stool oyster bar that served exactly one thing: raw oysters. Shuck to order, 15 cents a dozen. It wasn't a restaurant yet, wasn't even a kitchen. It was a man, a knife, a counter, and the belief that Mobilians would always eat oysters, even when they couldn't afford much else. Oliver was a showman as much as he was a shucker. He talked, joked, argued, and entertained while working the bar, and customers kept asking him the same questions over and over. Instead of repeating himself, he started writing answers on little hand-painted signs and hanging them on the wall. Then he added jokes, then one-liners, then bits of philosophy. Over the decades, those signs multiplied into thousands, roughly 6,000 by most count, turning the restaurant into a living scrapbook of Gulf Coast humor and witticism. The walls became as famous as the oysters, and the first sign ever hung still sits behind the bar. By the early 1940s, Wintzell's had grown from a stool-side oyster stand into a full dining room, and Oliver made a move that would define the restaurant's future. He purchased a 190-acre oyster reef in Portersville Bay. The U.S. Bureau of Fisheries once called those oysters the finest in the country, and Oliver agreed. Owning his own reef meant he controlled quality, supply, and freshness long before farm-to-table became a marketing phrase. It also meant Wintzell's oysters had a flavor Mobile locals could identify blindfolded. Briny, cold, sweet, not bitter, and unmistakably from the Bay. The restaurant's slogan, "Oysters, fried, stewed, or nude," became a Gulf Coast catchphrase. It appeared on matchbooks, menus, t-shirts, and eventually highway billboards. It was simple, funny, and true. Wintzell's didn't pretend to be fancy. It didn't need to. It was a place where judges sat next to shrimpers, where tourists learned how to eat oysters properly, and where locals treated the bar like a second home. One of the most enduring figures in Wintzell's history was Willie Brown. Willie worked behind the oyster bar for 47 years. Willie wasn't just an employee, he was a part of the identity of the place. Heck, the entire city. Generations of Mobilians grew up watching him shuck oysters with a rhythm that sounded like music. He knew regulars by name, remembered their orders, and could tell by the look on a customer's face whether they wanted conversation or peace and quiet. When he passed in 2017, the Oyster Bar was officially named in his honor. Wintzell survived hurricanes, floods, economic downturns, and ownership changes. It is Mobile's oldest downtown restaurant, still operating in its original location, a distinction earned through stubbornness, community loyalty, and the simple fact that nothing else tastes like Wintzell's oysters. Hurricane Frederick, Ivan, Katrina battered the Gulf Coast, but the restaurant always reopened. Sometimes with plywood still on the windows. Locals came back not just for food, but for continuity, a place that felt the same even when the city around it changed. As the decades rolled on, Wintzell's expanded to new locations across Alabama, but the Dolphin Street original remained the beating heart of the brand. The creaking floors, the low ceilings, The smell of fryers and salt water, the handwritten signs, the oyster shells piling up behind the bar, all of it formed a sensory time capsule of Mobile's past. Tourists saw a quirky seafood joint. Locals saw a piece of themselves. After an early 2000s peak of a dozen restaurants stretching from Mobile Bay all the way to Pennsylvania, today there are 6 scattered around the state of Alabama, including 2 right on the Mobile Tensaw Delta. I myself have been a part of that Wintzell's history. I've eaten there since I was a child. And even for a while, I was employed at this historic eatery. I met so many influential people in my time there. I touched so much history. I made their award-winning gumbo, jerk chicken chili, and bread pudding. It was my introduction to catering and where I learned to shuck oysters. I worked for 4 of the locations during my time there. I survived Mardi Gras and downtown location, endured the Fairhope Arts and Craft Fair crowd, and entertained countless families celebrating a graduation, retirement, or the life of a loved one. It's where my family gathered after my father's funeral. I learned so much from my time there. I learned what true charity looks like. We donated so many things, food, services, or just plain money to so many deserving organizations without anyone knowing we were involved. That is true philanthropy. If you ever saw a news report about a band getting new uniforms or a church being rebuilt after a fire thanks to a large anonymous donation, there's a pretty fair chance it was Wintzell's Oyster House. From the quiet waters of the Mobile Tensaw Delta to the bustling kitchens, tackle shops, drive-ins, and oyster bars, these 4 names remind us that Southern culture is built on more than tradition. It's built on people who dared to create something memorable. Morrison's Cafeteria, Lou's Fishing, Checkers Drive-In, and Wintzell's Oyster House each began as local dreams that grew into legends. As the sun sets over the Delta, their stories remind us that the spirit of the Gulf Coast endures. In every meal served, every cast line, every drive-in order, and every oyster shucked. This is the Delta's gift to the South and its legacy to the world.
Hey hippie, put the pipe down and hit the like and subscribe buttons, or I'm gonna tell the drug dogs where your stash is.